So let me kick in here. So last night, in a surprise move that really caught everyone by surprise and yet no one by surprise, Joe Biden pardoned his son, Hunter Biden. Now, keep in mind, this is the same Hunter Biden who profited off his father's name by guaranteeing access to the office of the vice president, who lied on federal gun purchase forms, who cheated on his taxes, who has appeared in a visual assault of our senses in a picture after picture after picture, weird pictures, by the way, that he actually took and then kept like mementos of himself posing in his grippy underwear while doing crack with hookers. The same Hunter Biden who was kicked out of the Navy Reserve in 2014 for failing a drug test. All of those issues, they represent federal crimes, and his daddy just stepped in last night and issued a pardon that is so sweeping in nature that it covers a full decade and contemplates pardon for any crimes, whether known or unknown. Y'all, this is way more than a sweetheart deal. This is just another example of the public trust being trashed by an administration that has refused to ever hold anyone accountable, ever. Look, I had a coworker once, years ago. She was a really neat lady. She had her first and only child rather late in life, and we were talking one day at work, and she told me that she did not believe in spankings. Okay. I'm not a huge fan of them either. Spankings surely always be the last resort when you discipline a child, in my opinion. But to tell a child that spankings just don't exist, well, what happens then? Well, she came to work one day, and we got a good laugh about what happened the day before at her house. She said that she and her 4-year-old son were out in the yard working in the flower beds when he picked up the hose and he acted like he was going to spray her. And she told him not to do it. But she could see it in his eyes that he was weighing out the whole forgiveness versus permission thing. And she told him again not to do it, put the hose down, and then he sprayed her up and down and gave her a full soaking. She said she was so mad, she took off after him, chasing him around the yard, and the whole time he was yelling, "You don't believe in spankings! You don't believe in spankings!" And she started yelling back, "I do now!" Well, we got a good laugh out of that. But the issue, it was not that her little guy was fully disobedient. I mean, he was 5. The real issue was that he had no fear of repercussions. There was an absence of accountability. He sprayed her with a hose because he weighed out in his mind that he didn't see any concern about the aftermath of his actions. In his case, Mom changed her mind, but Hunter apparently has never had that. His dad, Joe Biden, has rescued him at every turn, and it shows. But Joe Biden is not known for holding people accountable at all, has he? Ever. Have you ever known Joe Biden to try and hold someone accountable outside of political expediency? Just for his administration, let's think back to the debacle pulled out from Afghanistan. It was chaos. 13 U.S. service members and 170 Afghan civilians died right there at the Abbey Gate in Kabul. Thousands of Americans were left behind. Hundreds of billions of dollars in military equipment went to the Taliban, who had been our sworn enemy for over 20 years. And oh, by the way, who resigned? Did any general lose their job? Did we see any resignations or firings of any secretary, deputy secretary, undersecretary, anyone at all? The answer is no. How about the southern border? Has there ever been a more definitive breakdown of social order and national security? I mean, millions have streamed across the border largely unfettered. Whole communities have been devastated, resources drained, and yes, worse yet, we see a constant series of stories about crimes being perpetrated on Americans by illegal migrants. Deaths that should not occur but for the ability of criminals to enter our country freely. Has anyone in the Department of Homeland Security been fired? Has Secretary Mayorkas even acknowledged the failure of his Department of Homeland Security to actually secure the homeland? And again, the answer is no. All right, let's do one more. How about the economy? During the past 3 years, we have endured the highest inflation in decades. Interest rates have been stymied. The housing market tanked. Gas prices are twice what they were when Biden took office at one point. Which economic advisor to the White House had any fear of losing their job? I mean, was there any accountability? I mean, if your job is to advise the president on economic affairs and the affairs that you advise are then an economic disaster, then maybe you're operating outside your gifts and you need to get another job. But they won't. They won't do it. There's no fear or concern about accountability measures like that in a Biden White House. And the same president who won't fire anyone for doing a truly horrible job is also the same president who, unsurprisingly, just announced that all of Hunter Biden's woes, his addictions, his crimes, his dereliction of military duty, all of it, were somehow political prosecutions. The same Joe Biden who in June of this year announced to the world sanctimoniously that, quote, "no one is above the law," in direct reference to his political opponent, Donald Trump. Trump, The man who has faced more lawfare, more political hit jobs, more politically based prosecutions than perhaps any man in history. Well, Joe Biden said with disdain for the half of Americans who believed that Trump was guilty of everything that no one is above the law, and he guaranteed that he would never pardon his own son. He guaranteed it. He said he wouldn't do it. He lied. And then he pardoned his son. Because apparently no one is above the law unless they run around in Joe Biden's sphere of influence. Look, it's long been known that presidents have pardon power. They do. A president can commute a sentence and set people free. A president can absolve a record and issue a pardon that seems as if a person never committed a wrong at all. After the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln pardoned his own sister-in-law for supporting the Confederacy, since her husband had been a Confederate general who was killed in battle. Bill Clinton, he pardoned his own brother, but only after his brother had served a full 10-year sentence for drug charges. Donald Trump, he pardoned his son-in-law's father for tax evasion 10 years after he had completed his 2-year prison term. Hunter Biden's pardon is not the same. Not at all. In fact, we should keep in mind that Hunter Biden's pardon may be one of the most sweeping presidential pardons we've ever seen. Even when President Nixon resigned from office in disgrace due to Watergate, President Gerald Ford issued a full and complete pardon of Nixon to avoid sending a U.S. president to jail. But the Nixon pardon was just for a period of several years in his presidency related to his presidential, duties. Hunter Biden, he's been pardoned for a full decade for crimes of which he already pled guilty, crimes of which we may not ever even know about now. Let that sink in. Let it sink in that the drug addict, tax evading Navy reject got a better pardon than former President Richard Nixon. The American people have been abused in this process. The public trust in the office of the president has been used and abused by the Biden family in such a way that it appears that they will all go on to live on the beach in Delaware and laugh together while they shop in Nantucket. And there'll probably be a book deal. And the liberal media will say, "Oh, shucks, he's just a daddy who loves his boy." Meanwhile, good, honest, hard-working, salt-of-the-earth folks at the grassroots level, they see a crackhead who sold out his own country for $1 and got kicked out of the Navy for pissing hot on a drug test, and now he somehow makes finger painting art turn profitable. And no one is issuing a pardon for people like Daniel Penny in New York. Kyle Rittenhouse, he had to stay in trial like a thug while he was knowingly innocent. Black Lives Matter, they can burn down whole city blocks with impunity and have streets named after them like they're rioting with some kind of a landmark moment in human rights. Transgender mass murderers can shoot up a Nashville school and have their manifesto hidden from the public eye. And while we're at it, what's the latest on whoever it was that tried to assassinate President Trump? So yeah, am I mad? Yes, I am. We all should be. And I'm disgusted. The American people, they want some accountability, not from the lower ranks. We just want someone to be the stand-up guy or girl and take ownership of the failures that we've been living through. We've been given no accountability on Afghanistan or the border or the economy. But this past weekend, we learned that accountability is going to actually be on hold now until January 20th of next year. There is no accountability in D.C. right now. Accountability is a byword. It's an archaic symbol of something that common folk expect but elitists avoid. Forgiveness does not mean there's no accountability. You can love someone and still hold their feet to the fire. But without the promise of penalty, there's never going to be accountability. And that's how Hunter Biden grew up. That's how Hunter Biden, the 50-something-year-old man, lives. And that's a wrap for the Right Side Way.